everybody, and welcome to another Top 5 Board Gaming List. Today I'm going to be talking about something that I've really never mentioned, but it's something that's absolutely huge throughout the world. It's something that a lot of people are really big fans of, especially here in the US. A lot of people like it, particularly in the South. And that is racing. That's right, we're going to be talking about racing games. Now, there are a decent number of them, and there are certainly ones that are well endorsed and sponsored, whatever you want to call it, by like things like NASCAR and all that kind of stuff. But there are some that are a little bit more abstract, not so much that you're just like, whoa, this is so crazy, or whatever it happens to be, but that you still feel like you're in a race and you're going and you're moving and all that kind of stuff. Now, what do I mean by a racing game? Essentially, I'm defining a racing game in the easiest point possible, where you are going from point A to point B. Whoever gets there the fastest wins. Now, I've got one thing on this list that's a little bit of a cheat to that, but when I get to it, I will discuss it, obviously. For now, though, I will go right on ahead into my number 5. At number 5, I've got a game that unfortunately I do not own. I have a game that's similar to it, but this is one that really creates a lot of ire amongst many gamers, and that is Robo Rally. Robo Rally is a programmed movement game where everybody starts on a single spot, well, not a single spot, but everybody starts in a specific area, and then there is a single goal. There is a specific tile that you are trying to go to, or a specific square, rather, but either way. The thing is that it gets all kinds of crazy because the way the program movement works is if you run into somebody else, then you just keep moving and push them along with you. If you run into a wall, then you just stop and then you turn, or whatever it happens to be, and all of this kind of stuff. And so if you go off the edge of the board, you have to restart back where you were, I believe. It's actually been a while since I played it. But either way, in the end, it is a race. You are trying to go from point A to point B and as little movement as possible and in as few rounds as possible. Now, I find it personally pretty fun. I think it's pretty interesting, and for me, I take the whole like getting run into and all that kind of stuff, I take it all in stride. But like I said, there are a lot of people who have a lot of venom for this game, and they absolutely hate it. And the thing is that I don't really blame them. I understand why people really don't like it, because it can be extremely frustrating when you sit there and plan out your exact route and you see exactly what's going on, and then somebody knocks you one square over and it just ruins the whole thing. That happens. It happens all the time, pretty much every single game that you play. And so that's why it's really low on the list, because I personally like it, but I know that many others do not. I like that you have to really get a lot more thought into it. You have to seriously think about the orientation of your robot and twisting and writhing and moving and all that kind of stuff, or just rotating around to go in the correct direction, all that kind of stuff. And again, it can be completely ruined in a single turn or less. Doesn't matter. But again, that's the way that the game is. I think that it's pretty fun. I actually have Ricochet robots, which is relatively similar, but not quite. And some people have less venom for Ricochet robots, but by and large, Robo Rally is something that a lot of people either greatly love or greatly hate. I'm personally like, it's pretty fun. I like it. But either way, that's why Robo Rally is my number 5 racing game. At number 4, I've got a game that I actually did a review on not extremely long ago, but it's a very simple game that has very easy mechanics, but similarly to Robo Rally, it also uses program movement, so it can really change the dynamic on the board and all that kind of stuff. The game itself is Grabwell. I have here the original edition. I don't have the new edition because why would I buy a new edition? But either way, the whole point of Grabwell is that you're essentially just going out in a giant spiral, and whoever gets from like the black hole, the singularity, out to the wormhole wins. That's it. Easy peasy, right? The thing is that the way the program movement works is it's actually done by gravity. It's done by gravitational pull. So you go towards whatever the largest and or closest object is. is or are. So it makes for a very interesting movement. Again, just like with Robo Rally, you do have program movement. The nice thing with this is that you've only got a single track though. So it becomes much, much easier to not necessarily keep track of where you are or where you're going, but more along the lines of it becomes a lot easier to sort of wrap your mind around exactly what the cards mean at the time, at least at the time that you play them. So you've got the cards that will pull you to the nearest object, that'll push you away from the nearest object, that'll push away the nearest objects from you, all sorts of stuff like that. And it's a very interesting game, and it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of replayability here, and it's a racing game. It's very simple. You can play it with pretty much any ages. You can play it with kids, you can play it with adults, grandma and grandpa, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun, nice little game that does still require a substantial amount of thinking, and thankfully does not have nearly as much venom as something like Robo Rally does. But either way, with all that, Grabwell is my number 4. At number 3, I've got a game that doesn't quite break the rule of we're simply going from A to B, but at the same time, this sort of really adds on top of it. That's really the idea. It's a really, really great game, though, that is Jamaica. The whole point of this game is that you're really essentially just racing around the island. That's the entire point. But along the way, you need to like collect treasures, you get coins, you get this, that, and the other thing, and all that kind of stuff. So it's got a little bit more meat to it than what you might consider a standard racing game, which again is a great thing. It's nice, but at its core, it's really about how fast you can go, and you know, if you get there first, then you basically get more. Essentially, you get more points, and then you know, just depending on how well you do along the way, potentially you can catch up. And all this kind of stuff. So it's a lot of fun. It's a cool little game that, again, is relatively easy to play, pretty simple to pick up and learn, but the reason that it's higher on the list compared to the others I've talked about at number 3 here is that it adds more to the racing formula. It's something where most people are just kind of like meh about racing because it's such a simple concept. I really like Jamaica in that it adds that little special something or other to make it just a little bit more interesting, but still having that very core and rather simple idea of we're going around an island. And that's pretty much it. But either way, Jamaica, great game, and my number 3 racing game. At number 2, I've got the game that I mentioned that sort of cheats the system a little bit in terms of being a racing game, and it's also one that I unfortunately do not own. The game itself is Camel Up. I know looking at the box you might think it's like, no, that's Camel Cup, but no, it's actually Camel Up. Either way, that is not the point. The point is that this is an incredibly fun game. And when you first read about it, when you first hear about what's actually going on, then you'll probably think, that sounds kind of dumb. But then you actually get to play it and you're like, that was really cool. That was a fun little stupid game with a dumb little pyramid dice rolling mechanic. But who cares about that part? We're talking about racing. Now, the reason that this is a bit of a cheat is because you are not inherently racing. What you're doing is you're betting on the races. You're betting on individual legs of a camel race, and then at the end you're betting on like the overall winner and the overall loser and stuff like that. So it's it's more about sort of the meta race in this case, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun. It is surprisingly fun. It's very, very simple. All you're doing is rolling dice and moving the camels that much, but then you've got crazy stuff like the camels are stacking on top of one another, so if you move one at the bottom, it moves the entire stack along with it, and stuff like that. So it's really cool. It's a really neat little game. Again, the actual race itself is something that is not... I mean, it is directly controlled by the players because you're rolling the dice and moving the camels, but it's not like I am the red player and therefore I only move the red camel or something along those lines. That is not how it works, which again is not a bad thing, and it is just a little bit of a cheat in this case. But overall, it's just a great little game. The betting system is absolutely incredible. It's a ton of fun. The expansion that recently came out, I believe it was released at Essen if I'm not mistaken, actually adds a really good modularity to the game that allows you to increase the track length so you can have a longer game, and it also gives you some mitigation capability of getting whatever bet that you had. You can actually change it on the fly if it looks like your camel isn't going to win after all, and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. It's a surprisingly deep little game, but it's a ton of fun. Absolutely great little racing game that really sort of catches you by surprise. But either way, Camel Up is my number 2. At number 1, I've got another game that I unfortunately do not own, and this is one that most people would probably consider to be the only true racing game on this list, and that is Formula D. Now, what are we talking about? We're talking about Formula Racing, and that's pretty much it. And the idea is that you're rolling dice and moving around the track. Now, you might be saying, well, Danny, you talked about Jamaica and you talked about Camel Up, and both of those are like meta racing, and you've got all this other stuff going on and all this kind of thing. But the thing is, when you're talking about racing games, then at some point you gotta have like the pure racing game, kind of like relatively recently when I did my video on historical board games. It's very difficult to talk about historical board games without having something about World War II, because so many board games are based around World War II, or the battles they're in, or the politics about it, or any number of things like that. Same thing with racing games. There are very good racing games that are based off of racing organizations. Now, I don't know for sure if Formula D itself is based off of like the actual F1 racing organization. I don't even know what it's called. But either way, it's a very fun little game where, again, you're just rolling dice, and you actually get to like change your gears so that you can either go faster or slower based on the number of faces that the die has and all this kind of stuff. It's really cool. So you got to make certain that you like slow down for the corners, and then you can speed up at least a little bit on the straightaways, all of that kind of thing. It's a very dynamic game and surprisingly fun. Again, just like with a lot of the games on this list, it's something that you can play with younger kids if you really want to. You probably wouldn't want to play like Robo Rally with younger kids, but still, this one would be pretty cool, and it's something that is, again, a very easy concept to grasp, that you can just sort of jump in and be like, oh, okay, now we're moving, now we're rolling, literally. But either way, Formula D, my number 1 racing game. Folks, that's it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 favorite racing games. Just to reiterate, I know this is not only something that's a relatively large group of games, but at the same time you can really interpret this in a lot of different ways. In a sense, pretty much any game is a racing game of sorts. More often than not, especially you've got Euro games, you know, you're racing to get to the highest number of victory points, or you're racing to finish up in excavation in to call or something like that. So again, it really depends on how loosely you define what a race is. But like I said, for my purposes, where you are moving a piece or helping to move pieces from point A to point B, again, I know Camel Up is a little bit of a cheat on that, but it's just such a fun little game. You should really try it out. Either way, as always, very anxious to hear y'all's feedback. What is it that you like about racing games? What do you consider a racing game to be? Would you, like I said, would you consider something where you are literally trying to get more victory points to be a racing game? Would you consider something like Twilight Imperium, trying to get to the central planet? Would you consider that to be a race? You know, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of interpretation here, and I'm anxious to hear what you all think. But with that, thank you very, very much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much again for watching my video for my top 5 favorite racing board games. I hope that you enjoyed it, and again, I know that this category isn't too big, but I'm always curious what you guys think. Do you enjoy this category at all? Is it something that you'd rather stay away from? Do you have a personal favorite game or games in it? Please let me know anything and everything in the comments below, and as always, if you've got suggestions for games you want to see me review, or top 5 lists that you'd like me to go over, please leave those in the comments as well. As usual, I've got several of my playlists linked up at the top of the page so you can see more of my work, and if you want to see more in the future from now on, click on that big giant subscribe button. Plus, you can follow me on Twitter at DannyCGamingSci so you can get notifications when I post new videos. With that, thank you very much again, and I'll see you next time.